Hi everyone and welcome back to my YouTube channel. In today's video, I'm going to talk about my all-time favourite non-fiction books and also some of the non-fiction books that are currently on my TBR. So over the last few years, I started reading more and more non-fiction. At the minute, I quite like to always be reading a non-fiction book alongside any other fiction stuff that I'm reading. The type of stuff that I tend to read about is more like darker history, kind of true crime stuff, a bit of memoir, and also lots about sociology and social issues. So I think these are mostly in the order from when I first read them to when I most recently read them. So the first one that I want to recommend is The Complete Mouse by Art Spiegelman. So essentially the author of this book is a cartoonist and he has a little bit of a complicated relationship with his dad, but his dad was a survivor of Nazi Germany. He was persecuted during the Holocaust. He survived concentration camps. So this book is partly a memoir of the author and about his relationship with his dad, but then the main focus of the story is this cartoon depicting his dad's survival story. The Nazis are depicted as cats and the Jewish people are depicted as mice. I've just never seen it represented in such like a simplistic way before, and it was really powerful. It was very sort of easy to read because it is mostly cartoon, and I feel like you could just feel how personal it was, so I really recommend that one. Next up we have 84 Charing Cross Road by Helen Hanff. This is a little bit more of a light-hearted one, but it also did make me cry. So it's basically a book of letters that were exchanged between the author and an independent London bookshop, so some of the staff who work there. Over the years they developed this really special friendship and relationship. It all starts as Helen ordering books from them, but then over time they develop this closeness, and it's such a lovely story. I went into it not realising that it was a non-fiction book, which made it all the more emotional for me, just seeing like the power of books being able to bring people together. And like I said, I did cry at the end. Next up is my all-time favourite celebrity memoir. It's Jeanette McCurdy's book, I'm Glad My Mum Died. I'm not massively into celebrity memoirs, but this one has set the bar for me of what I want from a memoir if I go into it. If you don't know Jeanette McCurdy, she was a Nickelodeon star, and this is her honest, raw account of her life growing up with her mum, who put a lot of pressure on her, basically put a lot of insecurities in her about her body and just the chaos that comes with being a child star. She really does not hold back in this book. I feel like a lot of celebrity memoirs, they feel like they're holding back because of PR reasons, but this one feels so personal, so honest. And if you are interested in celebrity memoirs, then definitely read this one. On the topic of memoirs but not necessarily a celebrity, this is In the Dream House by Carmen Maria Machado. So this book focuses on a specific time in this author's life where she was in a emotionally abusive relationship with another woman, and she frames this memoir in a really interesting way where she kind of looks at it through different lenses and explores all the complexities of domestic abuse, especially between same-sex couples, and it was just so cleverly written. There were so many things that I highlighted in this book. It was very emotional and powerful. I desperately need a physical copy so that I can reread it because the writing in this is just gorgeous. Next up we have Written in Bone by Sue Black. So this is a part memoir, part kind of science book written by one of the most renowned forensic anthropologists in the world, and this book basically gives you a full tour of the human body. She talks in detail about each bone in the body, the biology of it and how it evolves over time, but also some of the secrets that can be revealed in people's bones. So two of the main things that Sue Black has done in her career is to firstly identify victims by their bones, and secondly solving crimes by interpreting the bones. So she may be able to tell by, I don't know, the length or the width of someone's bones as to their age, their sex, if they were injured, if that injury would have caused death. Throughout the book she talks about real life cases that she worked on. I think if you're into crime investigation or anything to do with science, then this is so interesting. It doesn't go like way too sciencey, she explains everything really well. I listened to this on audio and I just really liked Sue Black as a personality. Next we have Natives by Akala. So this book focuses on race and class in the British Empire, and again I listened to the audiobook for this, so I listened to Akala read it. It was a scathing sort of analysis and critique on Britain and how we deal with racism, how as a society we feel very uncomfortable with race. We often deny our role in colonialism, and it's just something that is not talked about in schools. But he also puts in some of his own stories, some of his own experiences, being stop searched, being subject to racist teachers in schools when he was a child. I just found him to be so intelligent, so witty, and I just thought it was essential reading for British people, or anyone for that matter. Next up are all ones that I've read pretty recently. So first up we've got Code Dependent by, I'm sorry, I don't think I'm going to pronounce this right, Madhumita Murgia. Again, I listened to this on audio, read by the author herself, and this is an analysis of AI and some of the advantages and disadvantages of using AI. I found this book so fascinating. She basically travels the world visiting lots of different communities, particularly ones that are reliant on AI or that have some sort of new AI development, and it was really, really fascinating and scary as well, because this is the world we're living in. We're seeing AI generated content constantly. She does talk about the benefits of AI in science and medicine to speed up certain processes, but then she also looks at the harmful aspects of AI, so using AI to create sexualized images of people, the limitations of AI algorithms. So she talks a lot about Uber and how their algorithm wasn't fairly paying them for the journeys that they were doing. And I just thought it was so interesting, very relevant, and I love the way that she put this book together. Next up is more of a true crime book, and this is The Art Thief by Michael Finkel. This was one of my favourite books of last year because it reads honestly like a fiction, like a thriller. So this is the story of the world's most prolific art thief. He was stealing multiple times a week from multiple different galleries, basically just completely under the noses of security, and he went undetected for a long time. I feel like I've said fascinating for every book, but this was genuinely so fascinating. It really looks at the psychology of this man and what led him to want to do this. He never even tried to sell any of it. He never did this for a monetary benefit. He literally just kept it all in his bedroom and wanted to look at it. And like I said, it reads almost like a fictional thriller because it's really fast paced, and it was just crazy to read about how he got away with it for so long. But I think if you're interested in crime but you don't want to read something that's too gory or is violence against people, then this is a must read. And then the final three that I want to recommend are all ones that I've read this year. So first off, we've got Nuclear War, a Scenario by Annie Jacobsen. Like the title suggests, it is a scenario of what would happen if a nuclear war started today. So in this scenario, it's looking at North Korea firing a nuclear missile at the United States at Washington, and it is very America focused, so that's the only sort of downside to it for me, but it really does go like second by second. What would happen, the science behind nuclear weapons, the history of them, so you get little snippets into when they were first kind of created and what they were planned to be used for. It talks about the President of the United States and what their powers are with nuclear weapons, which is especially terrifying in the current climate. And it really delves deep into the issue of deterrence and what happens when deterrence fails. Basically, it's a nightmare scenario, and it did give me some anxiety, and it regularly blows my mind just thinking about the existence of nuclear weapons and the potential and scale of destruction with nuclear weapons. So it did send me into a bit of a crisis, but it was expertly written, it was so well researched. So yeah, equal parts terrifying, and I'm going to say it again, fascinating. The next one is my, I think, current favourite book of the year. This is Into Thin Air by Jon Krakauer. So Jon Krakauer was a journalist in 1996, and he was commissioned by a magazine to go up Mount Everest. Little did he know that in 1996, Mount Everest would see its biggest tragedy to date, and multiple people on Jon Krakauer's expedition, including some of the expedition leaders, unfortunately died on the mountain. So in this book, we're looking at Jon Krakauer's personal account of what's happened. He also talks a lot about the commercialization of Mount Everest and how that massively increases the risk to people's safety. He also talks about the interest in Mount Everest and why people want to go up there when it's so dangerous. But ultimately, this book is focusing on the disaster itself and potential reasons for why it may have happened. And he also does address some of the dramas that kind of happened after the tragedy. This book was published very soon after it happened, and he got quite a lot of backlash for that. He reported some things happening on the mountain that didn't quite happen as he thought, which then had long-lasting impacts on the victims' families. So in the edition that I read, he does address a lot of that. But yeah, I just thought it was so interesting to learn about the mountain itself, the Sherpas, who are basically paid by rich people to trek them up the mountain. They'll often be sort of carrying the bags, and it really just looks at the kind of weird experience that if you have enough money, you can pay to get up there, and these tour companies will do their utmost to get you up there because there's that monetary pressure there. That is currently my favourite book of the year so far because I sobbed at this book. You really feel like you've got to know these people through John's eyes, and it was just so sad. I was literally sobbing. So I love this one and I would really recommend it. And then the one that I read most recently is The Price of Life by Jenny Kleeman. So essentially she's looking at the cost attached to human life. So she'll look at the cost of giving birth, the cost of IVF, the cost that a hitman charges to take a life, the cost of the life insurance that you might get if you die, and how that changes depending on how you die. And it all centres around the question of, can you put a price on a human life, and what are the factors that will influence that? So one of the things that constantly crops up in this book is that people are very reluctant to attach an actual price tag to things, but there is clearly a cost benefit analysis going on. I wasn't sure if this book was going to be a little more like business focused going into it, but it really wasn't. It was more just a social analysis of this concept. I thought it raised a lot of interesting points, a lot of interesting questions, and again I thought it was really well researched. I'm just jumping in here because I forgot to mention one, and I've just finished the outro for this video. So one of my favourites from I think last year was The Five by Hallie Rubenhold. This book is about the 5 victims of Jack the Ripper, and rather than looking at Jack the Ripper himself, we're looking in detail into these women's lives, what their backgrounds were like, their struggles, taking the focus away from him and onto the women's lives who he actually affected. She also looks at the social and the political situation at the time. It feels very atmospheric, and I feel like she paints a really good picture of what London was like at this time. It also looks at the validity of the claim that these women were all prostitutes or sex workers. So yeah, I just wanted to jump in because I realised that I didn't mention it, and I didn't want to forget it because it's such a good true crime book. I love the perspective that it takes. And that's all the recommendations for books that I have read, but I thought I would also just talk about some of the ones on my TBR. If you have a similar sort of taste in non-fiction to me, then this is what I am going to be reading at some point. So I'm currently listening to Invisible Women, Data Bias in a World Designed for Men by Caroline Criado Perez. This is raising a lot of interesting points about how women are consistently ignored in data in a world that is designed for the male form, and how men's data is treated as the norm. Women are almost treated as an anomaly. It's really opening my eyes because I do think there's some internalized misogyny in here. We probably all do. So this is definitely opening my eyes to some of the things that I've never even thought of, but have definitely experienced in my own life. So yeah, really enjoying this one so far. In a slightly similar vein, I recently added Men Who Hate Women by Laura Bates, and also Pink Pilled Women and the Far Right by Lois Shearing to my TBR. I think since Adolescence came on Netflix in the UK, there's been this big push around incel culture and the far right, so I'm very interested to learn more about that. I'm not even sure if Pink Pilled has come out yet. It definitely comes out this year at some point, but that is about the inclusion of women in this culture and why you would ever be in that culture, because it literally doesn't benefit you at all. Another one kind of similar is Creep by Miriam Gerber. I don't know a ton about this one other than it's a collection of personal essays relating to the sociology of the creep, so I imagine it's going to have some similar themes to the ones I just mentioned. Another one is They Can't Kill Us Until They Kill Us. I'm not sure on the pronunciation, but it's written by Hanif Abdurakib. This is his personal account of being a black Muslim in America, but I think he talks about it through the lens of music and culture because he's also a music critic and poet. So I thought this one just sounded like it had a really interesting structure to it, so I'm excited to read that. And then another non-fiction author that I want to get into is Naomi Klein. The two that I've got on my TBR at the minute are Doppelganger and The Shock Doctrine. I did try and start reading The Shock Doctrine before bed a few nights ago, but it was just a little bit too complicated for my sleepy brain, so I will get to that eventually. And then Doppelganger is apparently about her experience with a woman of the same name as her, posting lots of controversial opinions that people thought were her saying them. And I don't really know what else it's going to go into, but I've heard lots of good things about her as an author. A few others that are related to more true crime topics are Rabbit Heart by Kristen S. Irvin. So this is a memoir written by the daughter of a woman who was abducted and brutally killed and it took many years to, I think, bring the killers to justice. So I feel like this one is going to be really emotional and hard-hitting, and I'm putting it off because I don't really want to picture myself in the shoes of the author where this horrible thing has happened to her mom, and I just feel like it's going to be something that I'm not going to want to read about, but it's going to be a really interesting look at the effect of crime on people's families, which I'm always interested in. Next, we've got a classic, Know My Name by Chanel Miller. This book is written by the survivor of the Stanford sexual assault case. I know I'm going to love this. I remember being really upset over her victim personal statement when she wrote it for court, so I already know she's going to be a brilliant writer. And this topic is always just so hard to read about, but it's so important to read about because it's still so prevalent today. And then my last true crime type one is The Lasting Harm, Witnessing the Trial of Ghislaine Maxwell by Lucia Osborne Crowley. I remember watching a documentary about this case a few years ago. Quite a lot of the details have gone now, so I would like to just refresh my memory on that. Next, because I loved Into Thin Air so much, I want to read Miracle in the Andes by Nando Parrado. I believe this is about a plane crash, and many of the passengers actually survived for quite a long time before they were rescued. So I feel like this one is going to be very emotional, but also quite inspiring as well. I do love reading about human hardships and how people have overcome them, so I'm sure this one I will love as well. A couple of other darker ones I recently added, I think because of Zuki the Bookworm's video where she talked about like really dark non-fiction books. So first up we've got We Wish to Inform You That Tomorrow We Will Be Killed with Our Families by Philip Gurevich, and that title just drew me in straight away. This is about a genocide in Rwanda, and I don't really know anything about Rwanda, so I thought I'd pick this one up just so I am a bit more educated on that. Next we've got Nothing to Envy, Ordinary Lives in North Korea by Barbara Demick. I hear a lot of things about North Korea. I don't know a lot about the actual reality of it, so I think this book looks at multiple different residents in North Korea who had escaped. My only worry about this book is that it was published in 2009, and obviously a lot has happened since then. Whether it's going to have a bit of a forward, I'm not sure, but I'm very interested in this one as well. Next, we've got a couple of American ones. So The Only Plane in the Sky, An Oral History of 9/11 by Garrett M. Graff. Apparently this is a very well-researched book into what happened on 9/11. And then next is Columbine by Dave Cullen. So again, I think this is an account of what happened at Columbine. I'm always just really interested in learning about darker things that have happened in history and how they've happened, how people have dealt with them. You'll obviously have seen that theme throughout. And then the last kind of also messed up one is Smoke Gets in Your Eyes and Other Lessons from the Crematory by Caitlin Doughty. So she worked in a crematory. She might still work there, I don't know. But I do also enjoy books about death because death is such a scary thing for me. So I think learning more about it just helps me realise that it's just a normal human thing and it's going to happen to us all anyway. And then the last three I think are a little bit happier. Firstly, we've got Conversations on Love by Natasha Lunn. This one I think just looks at the loveliness of romantic love, platonic love, friendships, families, and I just think it's going to be a nice heartwarming book. Then we've got Everything I Know About Love by Dolly Alderton, which is her memoir. I recently read Good Material by her and I really liked her writing, so I'm just intrigued to learn more about her. And then the last one is really fun. So it's Disney Hide, The Untold Story of the Rise and Fall of Disney Channel's Tween Empire. This book is written by Ashley Spencer. I was fully raised on the Disney Channel. Every morning before school, every day that we got home, me and my sister would watch Disney Channel. Lizzie McGuire, That's So Raven, Sweet Life of Zack and Cody, Wizards of Waverly Place, Hannah Montana, how could I forget? Literally lived and breathed it. So this book is apparently narrated by Lalaine, who was Miranda in Lizzie McGuire. So I definitely want to listen to it, but I think it just has all the juicy like insider information about all those different shows, High School Musical, like the films that they did from the shows. And I'm also just interested to learn about the business side of Disney Channel, whether it's going to go into like the certain contracts that they entered and what they could and couldn't do. I just think I'll find it so interesting, and it will actually be a light-hearted book for once. So that's always good for my soul. So that's all my favourite non-fiction recommendations and also all the non-fiction books that are currently on my TBR. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you've picked up some recommendations. Please let me know your favourite non-fiction books because I love reading them. I love having like a constant one on the go. So yeah, please do share your favourites with me in the comments. Please give this video a like if you enjoyed it so that I know. Subscribe if you want to see more from me, and I will hopefully see you in my next video. Bye!